Yes, I can.
Hello.
Oh, good day. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I thought it was just Koya Brown with us today. Are they tuning in as well, or are we just delighted with your company this morning?
Oh, my name is Unwanna. I'm with the Ray, and I'm also presenting with Koya
Oh,
today.
perfect.
He's
So
here on the call as well.
excellent. Well, thank you so much for you guys for hopping on this evening. And how's everything out stateside?
Oh, it's nice. We're in the summertime, so we still have daylight here in the evening. Good evening to my fellow Americans tuning in.
Well, we're delighted to have you here and really excited to be hearing about the Ray. And it's a 16-mile patch of that you're focused on your blueprint right now over near Atlanta.
We've actually grown to 18 miles on Interstate 85.
Awesome. Well, we're really excited to hear all the innovative approaches that you're taking out there, and how us pesky Australians all the way on the other side of the country, of the world rather, can be learning. And this is day 6 of our Forever Fest, and we're the council down in Melbourne has announced climate emergency. This is our opportunity to talk about 8 different themes and really just bring it back to positive solutions instead of negative rhetoric. So you ladies are living it truly, walking the talk out there, and we'd love to just hear what the Ray is all about.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we get started? All right, I'll start sharing screen. Thank you, Barney, for that introduction. I just want to say again, my name is Unwanna, and I'm very excited to speak with you all today about transportation and energy and how we are creating smart powered highways here with the Ray. I'd like to thank Foreverfest and my supervisor, Laura Rogers, for this amazing opportunity. Now let's jump right in. So the Ray begins with Ray Anderson, the founder and CEO of Interface, which is the world's leader in designing and manufacturing carpet tiles. Ray was a Georgia native who risked his family's entire life savings to start Interface in the 1970s. And then he grew it to $1 billion global business by the mid-90s. And then he risked it all again because he knew he could do better, that we all could do better. Ray had an epiphany. It was a spear to the chest moment about all the petroleum that made carpet going into landfills. He challenged Interface to go zero waste to landfill, zero carbon, zero fossil fuels. And he saved his company more than $400 million while doing it. But what he did for the world, Ray proved that you can do well by doing good. Circular economy and corporate sustainability, they're all mainstream now, all around the world and across sectors, because Ray Anderson was the first. Ray passed away in 2011, but his legacy continues on. He left everything to a family foundation run by his 2 daughters. And then in 2014, his youngest daughter, Harriet, worked with Georgia lawmakers to dedicate 18 miles of Interstate 85 as the Ray C. Anderson Memorial Highway, or the Ray for short. This stretch of highway, this memorial to Ray Anderson's pioneering legacy for innovation in the planet, has become one real-world test bed in the United States, a public stage for technology to shine in the world to prove that we can go zero too in transportation. At the Ray, we embrace his mission zero. Our goals are 0 deaths, 0 carbon, and 0 waste in transportation. At Interface, Ray Anderson traveled a path he never imagined, all because he had the courage to ask, what if? That question and the answers to which it led changed the world, igniting a global movement towards sustainable business practice, proving that a better way is possible. The Ray Highway is the next leap in that journey, and it's born of the same question, what if? What if we start over and reimagine the way we connect our lives, our communities, and our world in a way that's safer, more responsive, regenerative, and uplifting today and for future generations? The technologies already exist to help us achieve this vision. And it starts here at home. This stretch of West Georgia's I-85, its land and its community, is where Ray built his life and his company. The REA has become a publicly accessible living laboratory, and over the past 5 years, we've installed 13 future-forward transportation technologies, all on and along a high-speed, fully operational interstate. And that's thanks to a unique partnership. Our team is a 501c3 nonprofit that operates under an expansion of the P3, a P4. It's a public-private philanthropic partnership. We have a formal charter with the Federal Highway Administration and the state of Georgia's Department of Transportation. We help state DOTs try new technologies, and we mitigate the risks that come with it, enabling the federal and state governments to quickly scale up the technologies that we know can perform and succeed. One of our primary programs at the REA centers around the transportation and energy nexus because our current electricity grid is holding back clean mobility. Here in the US, we're expecting over 18 million electric vehicles, or EVs, to be on the roads by 2030. And yet our grid is struggling. Every day, it's becoming less efficient and increasingly unstable. You'll see in this chart on the right that we experience power loss 285% more often than we did in 1984. And when the grid is functioning, it's not fully connected. Our grid here in the US is not national. It's 3 regional grids, East, West, and Texas. It's also underpowered. A single megawatt charger for a Class 8 truck will draw the same amount of power as 1,200 homes. In an electrified future, a truck stop in a rural area will be asked to deliver the same amount of power used by 10,000 to 30,000 homes, even though the grid may have just been built to service a handful of homes and businesses. It's also under capacity, our grid. In part due to this lack of capacity, 245 new renewable projects, 40%, were canceled within the MISO regional grid between 2016 and 2020. That could have powered over 7 million homes. Our current grid is simply unprepared for the electrification of transportation, and we literally cannot onboard new renewable energy to make up for this without overpowering the limited remaining capacity. But it's not all doom and gloom, trust me. The technologies we need to modernize our grid are here today. Take HVDC, for example. That's high voltage direct current. It can move power more than several hundred miles, smoothing out natural fluctuations we experience with wind and solar power. Also, grid-connected energy storage for this power is viable already, financially and technically. We can use batteries to power transportation charging on demand at any time of the day. And DC power conversion from larger voltages to smaller, more usable voltages is advancing rapidly, driven by development in solid state devices. The benefits are clear. We can connect markets with HVDC. Alternating current transmission lines cannot efficiently transmit power over very long distances, but HVDC is 30 to 40% more efficient. And with it, we can create a coast-to-coast market for renewables, much as the original interstate system did for physical goods back in the 1950s. And the power will be balanced as HVDC tackles intermittent power and creates more grid capacity for onboarding renewables. All of this without increasing the levelized cost of energy. And we'd be reducing costs as well. Many reputable sources, including NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratories, their SEAM studies has backed up the advantages. For every dollar invested in national HVDC, there's a $1 to $2 net benefit through lowered energy costs. The benefits are clear, but in doing this, interstates hold the key. They're our blueprint for the future energy system. Using state-owned lands at interchanges, we can generate up to 36 terawatt hours each year. This can power up to 12 million EVs, and it represents an annual opportunity of $4 billion for state DOTs. And that number could be even higher if we install solar panels along areas of the public roadsides, like rest areas too. Then we could use this energy to charge electric vehicles. Wireless charging in travel lanes and direct current fast chargers located nearby will allow for fast and convenient EV charging. And this proximity of energy generation to its use makes for a more efficient system that could improve the financial case for investing in it, which we'll need for our new nationally connected grid system. Burying HVDC lines along our interstates enables greater use of our abundant renewable resources in the US. Now reconsider the millions of passenger EVs I told you about. To make this electric future a reality, we need to modernize exponentially to meet this unprecedented demand. And we must do it responsibly. We already own the land to do this. In fact, with the state-owned right-of-way land that's public roadsides, many DOTs spend millions of dollars each year to maintain it. Georgia alone spent $45 million in 1 year on maintenance. That's money spent on mowing and spraying pesticides and herbicides. Our workforce is put in harm's way every time they're on roadsides next to speeding traffic. And we're spending this money and labor maintaining turf grass that's prone to erosion. A better way to use this land is for developing renewables. This can help public agencies reduce their energy and maintenance costs while creating new revenue streams and helping to meet broader renewable and emissions targets. Solar and wind power are approaching price parity in many states, and all of this helps reduce dependence on the gas tax. We know all of this because we've done it. This is the Ray Highway. This is exit 14 on I-85 in West Georgia, USA. We have a 1 megawatt installation of 2,600 high efficiency solar panels. They're grid connected and owned and operated by our local utility, Georgia Power. And if you take a closer look at the area around this installation, you'll see the 40-foot safety setback. It's a clear zone that's away from the travel lanes. The panels are also located behind a crash barrier and safety fencing for their protection and for travelers. But that's not all. Our solar array is the first ever pollinator-friendly right-of-way solar in the US. Every one of these kinds of sites must have a vegetative management plan. And instead of using gravel or turf grass, we simply use low-growing, pollinator-friendly seed mix around the panels, which can look quite beautiful compared to traditional methods. And there are even more benefits of that. Pollinator plantings are very low maintenance and only need to be mowed once a year. And they don't grow very tall, and with our lifted panels, they don't cast shadows or affect energy generation. Plus, unlike turf grass with its shallow roots, these plantings grow very deep, providing erosion control. And since they're pollinator habitat, they help support local agriculture and beekeeping efforts. And on top of all of that, these plants qualify for MS4 carbon credits. So back to the solar panels. What do we do with this energy? We use it, and we use it to power EVs. Microgrids will be a useful tool as it connects solar panels to battery storage and DC fast chargers located at nearby exits and rest areas. Using this energy right where it's generated is more efficient and makes for more investable as a solar, battery, and EV system than each one of those on their own. And this means that solar electrons for local EV charging are more valuable than solar electrons back into the grid. It's also less costly than upgrading the grid to have enough capacity to onboard this new energy. And at the same time, it adds a level of resilience we currently don't have. That would allow us to be able to fuel vehicles even if the grid goes down. In the very near future, we'll be able to dynamically and wirelessly charge our EVs using infrastructure built into the road itself. We'll also be able to use this renewable energy on the roadsides to generate clean hydrogen through electrolysis. Together, it just makes both economic and environmental sense, just like using our interstate network to build an HVDC grid. Being able to efficiently move energy over long distances is important for electrifying transportation across the nation, especially since this sector is the largest GHG emission contributor in the US. And this is the perfect roadmap to follow for modernizing our grid. because unlike our existing regional grids, the interstate system is national. We'd give empty state-owned land a higher purpose without having to negotiate with multiple landowners, and DOTs already have procedures to accommodate utilities. Burying the HVDC lines increases aesthetics and also creates resiliency, even with extreme hurricanes, tornadoes, or regional wildfires. Interstates will become corridors of both supply and demand, making for a more powerful, efficient, and stable energy system. Now, if all of this makes as much sense to you as it does to me, then the only big question you have left is, where do we get started? So with that, I'll kick it over to Koya, who will show you how we can take the first steps to planning and scaling the build out of this vision.
Thanks, Unwanna. Hi, I'm Koya, a solution engineer on the transportation team at Esri, supporting the REA with the solar mapping tool. Let's jump into our demo. The old way of doing things is for DOTs to focus on roads, spending a lot of their time and energy in maintaining these roads. Every day, facing budget challenges, cutting grass on easements, maintaining right-of-ways, or selling off excess parcels. What if we could leverage the electric grid expansion to modernize roadway infrastructure? This is Iowa's existing right-of-way, which is about 238,000 acres. Esri, in partnership with the REA, a P4 organization, wants to show you ways to expand access to alternative energy by leveraging right-of-ways to generate revenue. Building off of work with the University of Texas, one of the REA's goals is to encourage DOTs to leverage undeveloped land assets by installing solar. Let's think differently about how to use our right-of-way. For example, we're installing solar panels in our homes. Airports are using solar panels to power their facilities. Why not use the right-of-way to generate revenue and to help create a more sustainable world with renewable energy? State DOTs have a lot of land to choose from, and to help us prioritize the land, we use a suitability model. But first, we had to put some criteria around the selection of possible sites. The right-of-way areas had to be within 5 miles of an electric transmission line, outside of national parks and forests, outside of protected areas, outside of urban areas, away from natural gas. We needed to be 20 feet from a rail line, and we needed to be outside of a highway clear zone, which is about 40 feet. We ended up with these pink areas shown after the criteria. There were areas just too narrow, so areas less than 60 feet wide were removed. That's assuming 30 feet for a row of solar panels and additional area around for maintenance and fencing. And this is the final result shown in blue. We can calculate the solar potential for each of these polygons and for the entire state. Using the rule of thumb calculation that 1 megawatt of electricity can be generated on 5 acres, Iowa has a solar potential to generate almost 5 million megawatt hours per year, valued at over $400 million per year. Most DOTs can do this analysis already using their street center line, right-of-way data, and other data published on ArcGIS Online. By doing this analysis like this, we get a more accurate picture of the land available across the state for solar installation. The analysis we just saw is based on acreage calculation. We can go further to analyze the actual solar radiation values. We picked a study area about an 80-mile stretch along I-80 on the west side of Iowa. Using solar radiation analysis tools in ArcGIS, we can be even more accurate with the solar potential calculations. To give you some background, our solar radiation tool uses the elevation surface to define the landscape. The elevation surface can be either a digital elevation model or DEM, which shows only the ground surface, or it can be a digital surface model or DSM, which includes the vegetation and structures on the surface. We can blend these with imagery to get a more realistic view to help us understand the terrain. In our model, we favored areas with higher solar radiation. Southern aspect or south-facing slopes, followed by eastern or western aspect, and low to moderate slopes for ease of installation and maintenance. And this is the result of our suitability analysis. The areas in darker green are most suitable. Now let's focus in on this area. Looking at data in 3D can give us more information about the analysis. To understand the landscape better, we can turn on LiDAR point cloud to see vegetation. Let's look again at the solar radiation created by the vegetation surface. When we swipe away trees, it's easy to see and understand the patterns in the data and see how trees block the sun. Now let's take a look at this large south-facing hill. This is suitable for solar installation. To refine our analysis even further, instead of calculating solar potential based solely on the landscape, we wanted to calculate solar potential based on solar panel installations. I've already added solar panels to this area. This project has over 35,000 individual solar panels that can generate 300 watts each. This array has the potential to generate over 13,000 megawatt hours per year, valued at over $1.2 million, just this hillside alone. And it has the potential to power over 1,200 homes. Using the EPA greenhouse gas equivalency formulas, the carbon reduction from this solar installation is equivalent to avoiding over 9,600 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. With this equivalent, which is equivalent to over 10 million pounds of coal not being burned, or getting 2,000 cars off the road every year, or not consuming over 1 million gallons of gas, or the equivalent of carbon sequestered in over 11,000 acres of forest. Now let's take a look further down the highway. This is a suitable hillside, and I've also added a solar array on this hill. Let's zoom in to see these solar panels. Creating a digital twin like this can help us analyze and plan the development. It can help us find situations that might be less desirable for the community. For example, at the top of this hill is a scenic overlook. The solar panels are in the right of way, but let's see how they might affect the visitor's view. We have an interactive tool, viewshed tool, that allows us to do this. We'll say that our visitor is 6 feet tall. We want to see all the way around, and we want our view to be 5,000 feet. I'm going to place the visitor here on the sidewalk. So what we're seeing is that the areas in green are visible to the observer, but the areas in pink are not visible, and the panels block the entire view. But what happens when we remove a couple of rows of the solar panels? Will that change the view? That helps. We can see the high hills, but still the shadow of the solar panels are blocking the view. Let's remove a few more. That's great. Now the entire hillside is visible. We can now zoom to the ground level to confirm. I'll remove the view shed. These are the solar panels that don't block the view. Now we can quantify the trade-offs. For our decision criteria, we can compare a full installation scenario to preserving the view and calculate the difference between them. These are powerful tools for the planning process. They can inform and improve decision-making, enable community engagement, and help us understand the trade-offs. Now let's go to another area. What's cool about this is that Iowa is already active in renewable energy production. This area here in Adair County has a lot of windmills. Now let's move on to an example of a solar installation. The Ray partnered with the University of Texas at Austin to investigate the potential of solar installations in areas of both the right-of-way and rest stops. The University of Texas recommended more analysis at rest stops because they typically have large areas of land that can be used for initiatives like this. Let's take a look at potential solar at this rest stop. What's interesting about this rest stop is that it already has an alternative energy theme. And if you see this shadow here, it's the shadow of a giant turbine blade. They have it on display and even have a plaque about it. Since this rest stop is already promoting the alternative energy concept, this will be a great example of installing solar at a rest stop to generate electricity and inform the public about the benefits of solar power. The area to the left has room for solar, so let's add some. I'll start editing. We have a new editing tool called the array that makes it easier to add multiple features quickly. So we know from the University of Texas that the right-of-way solar, a row of solar panels takes about 30 feet. I'll take 30 feet and I'm going to add some rows. You can do that by simply clicking 5, 6. That's a little too close to the road, so I'm going to back that up. And then we know they're about 4 meters wide. And I'll change that to 4 meters. And I can add these by clicking as well. So I'll just add some. This is probably too much because we want to use the grassy area, so I'll take it back a bit. Then I'll apply this array and clear this selection. When working in 3D, we want the solar panels to be on the ground. So I'll run a tool that allows us to get the Z value from the surface. And just like that, we've quickly added a solar array.
Have a quick question just from the audience. Have you guys thought of using that space for either car parks or there's possibilities? I think it's called agri voltaics systems where you can grow food underneath solar panels or have car parks underneath them. Or have you thought of the kind of space use in regards to the model that you're creating with what to do underneath the actual PV?
I believe we have. I'll pass that to Unwanna.
Yeah, thank you for that. So with these, this Esri tool, the solar mapping tool, is mostly used as a planning tool. And so we'd be able to allow states and municipalities and the federal government to see just how much they can use the existing land they already have. And then we can go a step further depending on each area, see what's the best fit. So there's really, it's a box of everything that you could imagine. And so this is the first step. Like there are many potentials. And so here we're just calculating where exactly would be a good fit, what's the most suitable, and the possibilities are almost endless.
And you mentioned the 1 megawatt hours for 5 acres, which is an awesome fun fact. Is there a cost you guys are kind of offering for an acre or 5 acres? Like if you kind of got that price point down? Just as a curious, because the scalability side's fascinating, like all of the, just in Georgia alone, the amount of free space near these roadways is amazing. But I'm just curious if there's that kind of per acre scalability sort of model, because all of the facts you're saying are awesome with 1 megawatt hours, 5 per acre, and 1 megawatt, to put that into perspective, can power 400 to 900 homes. So it's an amazing amount of energy you guys can make, which is really exciting. And it's all just kind of empty space for the most part, right?
Exactly. And so the cost of the solar panels themselves will vary, and there's many different ways you can structure the deal. So say you're the state DOT and you own the land, you can choose to own the panels and the energy that they output, or you can just set up a land use fee. Yep. And you can let the private developer and the utility handle all that and just collect your land use fee. There's many different ways to structure the deal.
Awesome. Well, do you think this can be used by private people as well, right? Doesn't just need to be like a private solar company or something, or are you kind of going more that utility, bigger scale route with state run stuff mainly?
Yeah, well, that definitely can depend. You can do either one. It just depends on what's the best fit for the state DOT. There are different opportunities or different priorities in varying states and cities. And so it's really up to them. And another thing that we're working on is laying out all those options, and we can help with our partners go through all of them and see what's best, what fits their goals, and then help them structure the deal that they want to make that makes the most sense for them.
Awesome. Well, thank you for those quick questions. It just was super curious and really exciting project and amazing technology, especially the kind of shadow scoping with the trees and the windmills and all of that. That's pretty amazing that they've got all of the shadows mapped out and the different aspects. So awesome technology, and I'm excited to hear more.
Awesome. So we just have a few more steps for this step. So if we want to calculate how much electricity this array can generate, we can run another tool. This solar array has 360 solar panels that can generate 128 megawatt hours per year, valued at over $11,000, or it could power up to 12 homes per year, or possibly the entire rest area. And this solar array is equivalent to a carbon reduction of 90 metric tons of carbon dioxide carbon dioxide emissions. This is what a solar installation at a rest stop would look like. We've just seen how we can leverage existing land assets for solar development, siting solar or planning installations, and community engagement. We hope this helps promote expanding access to alternative energy by leveraging right-of-way to generate revenue that can further be used to modernize roadway infrastructure. With that, I'll thank you for your time today. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Unwanna.
What's needed. Wow, wasn't that cool? Bernie said it himself. Every time I watch this demo, I just feel like the possibilities are endless. So thank you for that, Koya. Considering our vision of smart powered highways and this incredible tool, it's obvious that everyone wins. States benefit from lower maintenance costs of their roadside land, and they also benefit from new revenue sources to replace the gas tax. Our economy enjoys a coast-to-coast market for renewable resources, better investment opportunities, and local jobs for the production and installation of this renewable energy and EV charging infrastructure. And we all benefit from a better, more stable and resilient, efficient grid. And from transportation, we have convenient, cost-effective, clean electric travel options all across the country. And we also benefit from a better environment that's healthier air, reduced dependence on fossil fuels, just overall accelerating the clean energy transition. So I'll close out with this, the words of Harriet Anderson Langford, the founder, president, and visionary of the REA. She says this: interstate highway land is an under-leveraged asset. We believe the right-of-way holds the key to modernizing our energy grid, accelerating renewable energy generation, and electrifying transportation. Not only can we generate clean energy for clean vehicles using infrastructure that we already own, but state DOTs all over the country have the opportunity to tap into new funding sources through business models that the federal government endorses. This is our vision of smart powered highways. And these are the partners that are helping us realize it every day. My name is Unwanna. Thank you again for letting me speak. It's been a pleasure. And that's all, folks.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for presenting and taking this time. I know it's getting a little later out in America. We're only starting our day out here in Aussie, and it'd be great to just maybe chat a bit about the kind of cultural change that's sometimes needed with some of this stuff. And we've seen this definitely with wind turbines, that people are like, oh, they're ugly, or people are resistant to just change generally. You know, do you have any encouraging tips on just how we can encourage a positive transition, and just be a part of sharing that conversation of what we can all be doing, whether it's PV or generally acting a bit more sustainably. So just linking back to the community and kind of that culture change piece. And what are you seeing that the Ray is doing that's working, or any advice or tips or thoughts or anything?
Yeah, of course. Great. Well, this is part of it. Socializing, having events like this, getting the general public out, asking questions, having a dialogue. And the benefits are practically endless. There's anything that's your priority, you'll benefit from it. Whether you want to see lower energy bills, there you go. You want to reduce your carbon footprint, there you go. More, if you're coming from an agriculture perspective, we have the pollinator plantings under our solar panels. You can really get creative with combining and stacking all of these innovations in a really just efficient way that overall ends up benefiting you in the long run, no matter where you're coming from. And so just incorporating it into our daily lives, socializing it, and really knowing who you're speaking with, knowing what they value, what they need, you can find a solution readily and easily.
Wonderful. And do you think that the technology is kind of growing? Like what you're working with now within ARC, in another 5-10 years, it's going to be even more crazy. Seeing that kind of compounded nature of all the stuff you're working on.
Oh yeah, it's exploding here at the Ray. And this new tool that Koya just presented, this feels like a game changer. We can visualize it, have the digital twin, you can see exactly what you want. Here at the Ray, that's our job. We demonstrate technologies and advancements, innovations that are on the bleeding edge, that are just coming out. And then our job is to research them, vet them, demonstrate it, prove that it works on our highway, and then socialize it. We facilitate tech transfer, and we work directly one-on-one with our partners to say, this can work for you, this will benefit you, and it'll meet your needs and exceed your wishes and desires.
Can I add there on the technology piece? I worked at Georgia Power for some time doing this type of work. And I tell you, we were not going through any type of workflow that you just saw. It was really, our site selection was a lot different. Some things that we've added in ArcGIS Pro is the suitability modeler, which allows you to do all of this sort of planning and development of a suitability model right inside of Pro, which makes it easier. What we've done here is added a lot of, sort of workflows to do the calculations that can all be modified that we're willing to share, I believe, if we working with partners and stuff. So it's a really end-to-end workflow where I've seen the technology grow a lot, having started doing this years ago.
Yeah, it feels like that on a lot of fronts. It's like, why didn't we do this 10 years ago? But here now we've got a bit of the gaps to close as quickly as we can. So maybe between both of you, we could explore some of the other innovations. You mentioned that there's some other tech and some other ideas on mobility and transport, or any other kind of things that you're helping accelerate through the 18 miles of land that you are currently managing and building out all of these approaches and innovations on.
Yeah, of course. I'll take that one. So I'll just start by the ones that I've mentioned. So we have our right-of-way solar, which is located along roadsides of state-owned land. And we've combined that with pollinator-friendly gardens and plantings underneath that. And so that adds various benefits as well. So our 18 miles start at the Georgia Alabama state line. And so right there, we have a visitor center. Welcome to Georgia. And we have several of our technologies demonstrated there as well, including solar powered electric vehicle charging. So we have what's called a solar tree. It's a set of solar panels mounted higher up. And then we have that connected to battery storage and an EV charger right there on site. You can pull up to it. Actually, really cool is that right in front of that, you can drive over our solar pavement as well. So those are solar panels that are embedded in the ground, and they're super strong, so they can withstand the weight of your vehicle. And then you pull up right into charging. Around back, we have some of our safety technologies. So we have the wheelwright tire safety station, and that is a drive-through tire monitoring station that analyzes your tire pressure and tire tread depth in less than 10 seconds. You just roll right over it, and it can help you figure out exactly what's going on, what the state of your vehicle is, print out a receipt or send it to your phone. And the list goes on and on. We also do work in connected vehicle and autonomous vehicle advances. Smart road striping so that autonomous vehicles can see and drive themselves. And we have various nature tech and regenerative technologies located on our highway as well, including bioswales, which help clean stormwater runoff.
Wonderful. That's really exciting stuff, and the solar tree really sounds like the future there, that we can have these kind of trees that have real life growing underneath it that are charging our cars instead of fossil fuels. And I just invited Marcus to join the video, because he's really working directly on the council within Dandenong, and I'm sure he has some input with the GIS component and just generally what's happening in Melbourne.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, Unwanna, thank you for the presentation. Fantastic to see what's happening from a technology point of view. I'm curious to get a bit of an understanding. I made a comment in the chat, but I'm curious to see what's the sentiment like for Department of Transport entities around the US for shifting their focus away from we do roads and bridges and footpaths and drainage into, hey, we have an opportunity to become an energy player or have some say in the energy market. Is there a desire for them, or would this be just a tool you present and maybe they'd have interest or not?
Well, actually, we've seen that most of the support in DOT has come from agency leadership. So it's definitely there. But it's also a lot of work to do, right? So I just named off just a handful of the technologies we've demonstrated, and then teams already have the projects that they've been working on. And, up until recently, federal guidance has been a little bit unclear, but in the US, we just had a really huge announcement that actually ended up endorsing a lot of the technologies we talked about today. And so we're expecting lots of shifting in the next several years, maybe even several months. It's just an ability about like what we're able to do and what seems practical and feasible. We always need or want an example to make sure that this is going to be viable and worthwhile. And that's why we demonstrate what we have on our highway to prove that it does work, and to alleviate a little bit of that worry and show that there's not as much risk as you may think. So I think we're in a really good place. We're heading a great place.
Yeah, thank you. And from a public standpoint point of view, we get research and stuff coming from where different countries see themselves in terms of their take up of renewables, or whether there's push up. In Australia, we have what we call NIMBYism. You've probably got over there, not in my backyard. That challenge you have. What's the public's view of whether or not this should be a DOT initiative? Is it something that they would expect DOT to lead on, or would there be local or gubernatorial pushback to say, hey, this isn't, the concept of stay in your lane comes up a lot. Is this a stay in your lane for DOT, or is this, hey, let's expand where we play?
Well, I mean, the essence of what we do here at the REA, we're a P4, public-private philanthropic partnership. So we're all about collaboration I don't think we'll ever be able, like, take a look at where we are now. When we have more working together, like we walk DOTs through the process and show that they're able to do that. And so we can do the same thing with the public, socializing this and showing, just really talking about the benefits that everyone can enjoy and why this is a good thing, and showing that this is something that'll have an impact, a positive impact on each person's quality of life.
All right, thank you.
Chris?
And I couldn't agree more that especially when it comes to jobs right now, what you're talking about really does encourage that healthy green and blue jobs. And I'm curious, are you guys within REA kind of a big part of our the Forever Fest is linking back to things like the Sustainable Development Goals, and kind of, you mentioned the green, the bond component of it, but things like environmental, social governance, or some of these kind of bigger momentums behind sustainability. Are you guys, and Paris Agreement and all of the excellent stuff that goes on in New York every year with the Climate Week and things like that? Do you feel like the REA's kind of broadcasting and helping build a model that's relevant for some of those things? Because it does feel like we are on this right track, but the more REAs and the more kind of blueprint models that can be expanded quickly, that's kind of what we need now. And it really feels like what you have is modular and can kind of work within every state, which is exciting.
Yeah, of course. So we're not about reinventing the wheel. So we'll take our technologies and what we've learned and our know-how and work with those who have sustainable development goals, or who maybe have different performance metrics, and really tailor it and show that this can be for everyone. And speaking to your point about jobs, solar jobs are very local in nature and will require community input, and just really show a great economic opportunity in that nature. Solar offices set up in the communities where they are and recruit like local labor. And so that's skill building and that's opportunity. So it's just a win-win-win in any aspect that you look at it.
Wonderful. And I'm curious, does REA, because there has been some documentaries, especially last year, like Human Planet and by Michael Moore, and a few other docos that are trying to shake up per se and kind of put a counter argument on renewables. And I'm curious, do you guys kind of have ever have to put up with that discussion of people saying that, oh, the batteries are worse, or the mining for the solar panels, or that's a big pushback in Australia. As Marcus said, not only the manufacturers not taking the lead, but the kind of range anxiety, and then on top of that, I'm finding that people are like, oh, but the batteries are worse for EVs because of the lithium, even though a new lithium 100% electric car compared to a new diesel truck, it's going to obviously be a lot better than EV. But I'm curious, do you have any acknowledgement, or how do you manage people when they are coming at you saying that the creation of these things are also causing damage in a sense?
I totally understand that concern. And I think of that in my daily life as well. But that's why we say whenever we see an issue and we see the solution, we must make sure that we're doing it in a responsible way. And so that's where circularity comes in. One part of our mission is zero waste. And so we're always advocating for responsible use of our resources, whether that's our land or the natural resources that come out of it. So we are advocates for circularity and being responsible with whatever we're doing. When you're in the infrastructure business, which is transportation, you have to think decades into the future. You have to conduct an entire life cycle assessment. So that is something we're very aware of.
Yeah, and I think it's all the transition, the EVs that are on market today, even the new one, they're still not perfect, but hopefully in 100 years, there's going to be another new technology that will transition even in the right steps. And yeah, it's really, really impressive to see the innovation and the tech. Really good job to all of your amazing, coding and GIS wizards to make all of that stuff happen. And do you have any advice? Because it's something we're coming back to quite a lot within the Dandenong Council, which is what the Fest is helping represent. It's 165,000 people in the council's municipality, and 70% don't have English as their first language. So whether it's PV solar or some of the other innovations you mentioned, or generally sustainability, how do you find it navigating that cultural component of it? Any advice for Dandenong just to help make it culturally accessible, some of the things that we're talking about?
Yeah, of course. Well, so going back to the broader topic of sustainability, I learned it as 3 pillars, right? Environmental, economic, and social. And so we really have to invest as much as we do in social as we do environmental and economic studies and practices. And so built into that is equity, right? Social equity, and you may go further into diversity and inclusion. So whichever way that you connect with these people, like this is your community, right? And so community outreach is a huge part of that. You'll want to figure out your community's needs and make sure that you're working towards that. You don't want to just bring something shiny to someone because you think it's great and it's going to work. But if it's not the most beneficial for that community, then it could be put to a higher use. So
Yeah, I think thanks for that. I think it, like you said, with the columns, it's just making it kind of simple and really accessible. And I think graphics definitely can help kind of explain life cycles and explain that the solar tree is doing this, and then it's putting into the EV charging station batteries, and then your car can then come and charge up and continue on your drive. And I also really enjoyed the having the welcome to the state line, right on the state line, because people always like seeing the signs, and then covered by solar panels kind of really encourages that kind of positive association for your state, which is also pretty exciting. I think people for sure like that.
Visibility is a really big part of that. So you mentioned some excitement about solar trees, and that's one of the main messages we talk about with solar trees. So they're smaller, right? Because you just have a unit mounted so people can see them. But you can put signage, or you could do graphics, whichever is most accessible to your community, and show. That'll be a demonstration. People see it and they're excited about it. You could sit there at tables connected, or charge your phone or e-bikes, and then you can learn about a bigger installation that's located nearby, like our megawatt off of our exit. So you go to the visitor station and you see, hey, this solar tree charges this electric vehicle charging station. And then if you just go a couple miles up the road, you'll see our larger unit that's feeding clean energy back into the grid. So visibility is a very important component as well.
And just access, I think we've got a very big country out here in Australia, and yet we've only got less people than California in the whole landmass. So being able to distribute these sort of technologies and the REI vision, even to only a couple of acres, being able to have an EV charging station and a little bench that people can have a barbecue that's powered off electric, and some shade that they can sit under, and maybe some water, becomes a kind of utility thing as well, because people need water and they need places that they can stop and go to the bathroom and all of those sort of things. I think it's definitely a barrier out here in Australia, with just how big spaces are between each other with the EVs, but hopefully we're going to get that. And I manage a charity up here in Queensland with regenerating land, and the current project I'm working on is 400 acres, and we can plant 500,000 Australian trees on that, and it's all off grid, so we don't have power. So being able to one day have a solar tree, being able to have an EV charging station on that, and being able to kind of similar to what you're doing with your food program underneath the solar panels, being able to kind of combine regeneration of land with innovative approaches like the REI, I think really needs to be the future, because a lot of municipality area and industrial area and places near highways often have been damaged from an ecological perspective. So I think it's a way to innovate with the energy transition, but also support biodiversity and open spaces, which was our theme yesterday. And now we're on to mobility and transport, but being able to kind of bring those in a little bit, being able to potentially even plant some trees, or being able to just support greening areas, just being able to look after the land, because it is pretty unfortunate where what has happened in certain areas. And
that's, I was just gonna say, that's another reason why I'm super excited about our new solar mapping tool, is that since it's located in ArcGIS, any layers that you have can be included into that. So if you have areas with critical habitat or endangered species, or if you want to put social demographics in there, you can adjust the criteria and find, okay, we can't put solar here because we don't want to disrupt this habitat, or we want to put solar here for EV charging in this under-resourced, underserved community. We want to target those and make sure that they're getting priority with the new technologies and innovations that we're trying to do. So it's just another reason to be excited about that.
Agreed, and I think that distribution of that priority needs to be more focused on like suburbs and municipalities that do have either a kind of lower GDP or are more rural, because whether you've got a lower GDP or you're living in the middle of nowhere, I think both of those areas need a bit more attention. And I think Marcus has jumped back on with another question.
Hi, you're muted.
I think that's a great point around equity. We see a lot of the funding, or it seems to be a lot of the funding resources going into what is already quite wealthy communities. I read a lot in the States, and certainly there's no problem for what would be a predominantly white community or wealthy community to get access to their solar and have all the installations and battery tech, but not elsewhere. So I wonder then if there would be pushback from investment in, say, the DOT model that is appealing to the charging system, that appeals to people who can afford an electric vehicle when the average person can't. Should we be investing money in an infrastructure that's already supporting those wealthy enough to buy an EV vehicle, which is typically a higher price point? Or should we be putting it into supporting local communities who are maybe a little bit more displaced from the benefits of some of the renewable energy opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense. That may be something that we think initially, but actually one of our partners who's in the investment field, his group specifically wants to look at those long in-game projects that benefit social good. So we definitely have people out there who are like-minded in this sense, and there's more benefits than just financial. There's public health, and it just really trickles into many different aspects. And a lot of the funding and grant opportunities, equity has become more of a priority. So you really have to hit that hard if you're trying to get the funding. And I'm very glad that that shift is starting to happen, because we will have more evenly or equitably distributed resources.
Yeah, I'll echo that. There's a lot of movement in the transportation space around transportation equity, and a lot of the state DOTs are layering that into everything that they do in terms of how they're prioritizing projects, how they're spending money, and they want to look at impact, they want to assess gaps, and really start just distributing resources equitably.
Well, and hopefully the subsidies will catch up. I mean, there's literally billions and billions and billions of dollars going into making oil and fuel as cheap as it is still, and hopefully those subsidies will, as Marcus said, be encouraging those communities that, you know, can for the most part afford some of these technologies, and actually be pushing the money towards those who need to adopt and need to be a part of this transition and need a prop up to achieve that. Because right now the barrier for entry for EV is expensive, and it's also a bit of a chicken before the egg, because if you suddenly get, you know, 1,000 people in your town of 50,000 using EVs, and you've only got 10 charging stations that are public, suddenly you have a huge backlog of people not being able to charge their cars. So I think we need to really be focused on more on projects right now like Ray that really encourage that generation and storage and access to be able to charge EVs, and obviously put the remaining energy back into the grid, because yeah, we need to have the infrastructure there, because there's going to be such an adoption in these coming years. I can't remember, was it 16 million by 2030 EVs in America? Was that the fact? It's pretty insane.
So the number was 18.7 million electric vehicles on U.S. roads by 2030.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, that really shakes things up in Aussie. We've got 27 million people in our whole in our whole country, you know. So if we really could get our act together, we could have, you know, all EVs or 90% EVs, you know, by 2035 or 2040. If we, as one of the people on the chat said, you know, especially if we can start actually manufacturing it. We do have lithium deposits. We have so many mine sites that can be producing the actual raw materials, and we're already actually making a lot of big things. So yeah, the gap's there, and I'd love to hear from you two ladies. We've been trying to end each presentation with just a really positive note, because obviously it's been a really hard 18 months with COVID and all of the negative news that seems to be coming through our channels all the time. But maybe just ending on a positive note, or something that you're really hopeful about, you know, whether it's this year or leading into 2030, you know, what's something that gives you hope and keeps you encouraged with what you're seeing.
Koya, do you want to go first, or shall I take this one?
And you can take that one.
Okay. I'm personally really excited by our federal government it's hopping on board. So everything that we've been doing for years already, we've already proven it, but now it's getting backed up. It's catching on mainstream. And then so once it's at the top, we're all hearing about it. I'm sure many people in the US who are on this call today have heard about the infrastructure bill in some way. But so with that new guidance coming out, that just opens the door for everyone else to follow. And we've already shown that it's possible. So now it's just time to get to work, to start doing projects.
Really like that. And Koya, would you like to share as well with anything that's kind of giving you a bit of hope?
Yes, having worked in both the electric space as well as the transportation space, I'm really hopeful or excited to see that the technology is pushing forward, and there's a lot of input and thought going into being intentional, especially even with software development in terms of layering in DEI or equity into almost everything we do. And we're starting to see that from workforce and hiring pipelines to how we develop and think about solutions and the representation we have when we go out in front of folks. So I'm really hopeful about that.
Wonderful. Well,
Me too.
Thank you for that sharing. And Marcus, if you're willing to share from the Dandenong front, you know, with everything that's transitioning and obviously a bit of friction on certain fronts, what's keeping you hopeful over these coming years?
Sure. Well, I can't actually speak for the City Greater Dandenong technically as a consultant.
Just what's happening generally, Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah, look, I think our understanding of waste is improving. I think we've got a much greater handle on how we can address some of things like that. I think the concept of greening we're doing in our tree strategy across CUD is really useful, as we've had a low level of green canopy overall. And I think we're seeing some of the manufacturing sector understand how do they utilise things like solar panels on their roofs. So that's a conversation that's coming up consistently. So there's certainly a shift in the demand underway. Can we do more? Absolutely. Are there some psychological barriers? Sure. Are they able to be overcome? Yes, they are. Do we have time to wait? No, we don't. So otherwise, it's all positive.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for that, mate. And definitely agree on the roofs and just creating shade. And we are really a part of a very exciting transition. And I think just having these sort of conversations and having legends like Ray rocking up and sharing with halfway across the planet, you know, we're living in a totally interconnected age. And I think it is all about that sharing and collaboration and all of that. So we'll be sure to be sharing your website and some of your information out here in Aussie, and hopefully there'll be a Ray out here in Australia on one of our highways one day soon. So really good luck with scaling out, and I hope that infrastructure bill and a lot of the big policy shift ups that are happening through Biden administration will support you guys and elevate all of your amazing work.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.